What's going on, everybody? I'm back. Episode number 227 of the Club and Sub podcast. Tonight, I'm going to be breaking down UFC 318, headlined by Max Holloway taking on Dustin Poirier. Tonight, Lags will not be with me. He is on a work trip, so he is unable to attend. But I did say we'd be getting back to Sundays. So here we are. This card, it could be a fun one on paper, though. Again, it's another pay-per-view with a lot of juice. We don't have a title fight on it. We have a fight between two guys on the back nine of their career. So, look, I'm never going to complain about us having fights every week, but this is definitely not the best product they have put out as far as pay-per-views go this year. Real quick, before we get into it, guys, drop a like, subscribe, help us out, share if you feel so inclined. We'd appreciate it. And, yeah, let's talk about last night real quick. Last night was UFC Nashville. It was another turbo juice card. It was headlined by the Black Beast and Taliesin Teixeira. Finished with quite the early stoppage, in my opinion. I don't think any reasonable person could look at that and disagree. Now, obviously, I'm probably more upset than I might normally be since I had the over 1.5 in that fight. But all in all, it was a decent card for me. It was up 0.4 units. I had 3 units on Jake Matthews, 2 at plus 110, then another at plus 130. Look, the fight lasted a minute, so I don't really know what we take from it other than that. If the fight hit the ground, it was pretty apparent that Matthews had a big grappling edge, and obviously he exploited that. I had 0.6 units on Lauren Murphy, plus 460. Didn't work out. I don't really regret the play, though. She won round 3 and was coming on strong. I feel like if she got going a bit earlier in round 2, she could have gotten the decision. So, yeah, no regrets there. I had the aforementioned 1 unit on the over 1.5 in the Lewis fight at plus 190. Obviously, that didn't go as planned. And then I had 1.5 units on the over 2.5 at plus 144 in Mike Davis and Mitch Ramirez, which also did not hit. I thought that had a pretty good chance to hit once Ramirez cleared the first round with Davis on his back. But once Davis started going to the body late in round 2, Ramirez just started melting pretty quickly. But yeah, 0.4 units in the profit. Not bad. We'll take it as what it is. Yeah, Jared saying stoppage was interesting. Teixeira climbed back up the cage like Spider-Man. It was a weird finishing sequence. Yeah, and I've seen a couple people make that case, like, oh, he illegally got up. The stoppage is fine. But, yeah, I didn't find with them taking a point. That would be totally reasonable. But, you could see when he turned around that he wasn't out. It's not like he was, doing the stanky leg, against the fence. So, I don't know. I thought it was a pretty quick stoppage, but, is what it is. Tim saying Davis not getting the sun gave him literal AIDS. Yeah, I could, or Liberace AIDS. I was happy he didn't get the sub. Unfortunately, he melted him in round 2. But yeah, I also didn't think it was a great performance by Mike Davis, to be honest. I felt like he looked pretty bad across that fight. I think he's probably seen, his peak come and go, unfortunately. But yeah, I'll jump into it. We got UFC 318. Pretty decent sized slate. So yeah, let's get to it. First fight, we got Carly Judice taking on Nicole Cagliari. Judice decent sized favorite here. She is currently minus 280 to come back on Cagliari, plus 240. I'm not going to, I laid big juice on Judice in her last fight against Unieski Dubin. I'm not going to do that again here. I'm not going to bet the Cagliari side either, though. I feel like it's an interesting fight. Judice should really be fine here. I like her process for WMMA. Very, very high output, great durability, great cardio. She's pretty big for the weight class, 5'7" with a 68-inch reach. My biggest concern with her, my concern with the price, is she's still super green. She's very, very easy to hit. I think her grappling's okay, but we haven't really seen it tested by a decent grappler yet. And I would say that's Cagliari's biggest point of strength, is she is a decent grappler. I think she's got a black belt in jiu-jitsu. But for the Cagliari side, she's too small in my opinion. She's only 5'3", 63-inch reach. I think she's kind of harmless as a striker. I think if she's not getting to dominant submission positions, she isn't really the kind of woman who's going to process grapple you for 15 straight minutes. So I feel Cagliari kind of is relying on landing 5 or 6 takedowns and maybe, minimizing volume and winning a fight on optics, which she could do, or potentially finding a sub. But I do think Judice is just a lot more process-driven. She's bigger. She's more durable. Like I said, she's, for women's mixed martial arts, her style, which is come forward, throw a ton of volume, and be able to take shots is John saying he actually got his cup. For her style, come forward and just throw volume and throw power shots. It's just a very, very good style, and it's hard to, beat women like that. Tim saying wrestling the biggest question on Carly. I agree. I think she can get taken down. I think she probably will get taken down a few times here, but she seems urgent and she seems like a pretty good athlete. But yeah, I mean, that's why I'm not betting her here at the G's, because there are, I think, some questions and unknowns there against the black belt. But I do think Judice should take care of business. Moving on, we got Bruno Fajeda taking on Jackson McVey. Price on Bruno minus 725. The comeback on McVey plus 525. There's a part of me that wants to bet McVey just because, look, I like Bruno. I bet him in his last fight. I feel like he's got a number of really plus attributes for a middleweight. In particular, he's got huge power. He's a decent offensive wrestler. He's got a decent offensive submission game. But I feel like, with that, he also has pretty bad cardio. He's pretty hittable. We've seen him get put on bottom, and he's looked pretty bad when he's been there. So it's with that dynamic, it's kind of hard to be, minus 700. But he's fighting Jackson McVey, and McVey, obviously very, very inexperienced fighter, only 6 pro fights. They've all come against a very, very low level of competition, and they've basically all come inside a round. McVey just tends to bomb into the clinch, throw knees, throw elbows, look for guillotines in there, or look to knock you out in the clinch. And so far, he hasn't had any issue with it. The biggest problem I see is I just don't know that McVey's game is going to translate at all to the UFC level. I don't think he's an Aaron Jeffrey type clincher. I feel like on the feet, he's very, very vulnerable. Very, very easy to find, very easy to hit. We don't really have any good measuring sticks in terms of what his durability is like, what his cardio is like. He's never had to fight into the later rounds. And I said this last time we were breaking down a McVey fight, but typically with sprinters like this, they tend to not have great cardio. But again, there's just so little data that we can't even really say that. I think it's clear that Bruno is the much more physical fighter of the two, bigger hitter, more explosive. He's probably the better wrestler. I just feel like, I don't know. I think you could justify a McVey bet just steering into the variance. And if he turns out he's better than his tape, or, a lot of those unanswered questions get answered correctly, there's this huge, huge value on him. So I could see the justification for making a McVey bet there. I couldn't see any justification for betting Bruno minus 700. And the total here is just here, I'll pull it up real quick. It's not great. Yeah, minus 255 to the under 1.5. Again, if anything, I'd be looking to fade that and just fade, this being a clinch fight for 7.5 minutes. But yeah, I just don't have a strong opinion out of it because you could convince me Jackson McVey belongs nowhere near this level and Bruno whomps him. But I wouldn't really be shocked if, McVey's decent. And I would be pretty surprised if he was decent for the UFC. But if he's decent in the context of this fight and he could wear on Bruno and tire him out, I guess with that dynamic, maybe you want to edge towards the plus 500. But I don't really feel any need to get involved at this price or in this fight at all, to be honest. Moving on, we got Ryan Spann taking on Lucas Dresky. Spann's a minus 220 favorite. The comeback on Dresky's plus 185. Man, it's not even a weird fight because the last time I said what I'm about to say, I ended up taking Spann right at post and getting burned against Bogdan Guskov. I really feel like this fight should be a fairly straightforward fight for Spann. He's the better striker. He's the better wrestler. He's the better submission grappler. He's much, much, much more dangerous, much more explosive. I feel like he should knock Dresky out or submit him early in this fight more often than not. Having said that, though, we're at the point with Ryan Spann. Look, this guy, even at his absolute best, was never a guy who fought particularly well later into fights. He's always been a bit on the fragile side. He tends to court catastrophe. He's just one of those guys that catastrophe seems to find him. So it's do you really? Yes, he's much better than Dresky. Dresky, I respect him for heavyweight because he's kind of a volume striker, but he doesn't have much power. He's not much of a grappler. He doesn't sit down on anything. He's pretty fragile, which is not great in the context of this kind of fight. He's a pretty bad defensive wrestler. So Spann should win. At the same time, I'm just at the point with Ryan Spann where it's how can you possibly lay a price like this? Yes, this should be an easy fight, but how many times? Yeah, Jared's easy here to let us down one more time. Yeah, how many times do you have to see Spann do it? Yes, I think he's going to run through Dresky. I don't think he should have any issues with this fight. Honestly, if I were trying to play a contrarian angle on the fight, I think over and goes a distance are interesting looks just because we know Spann's going to gas out. If Spann goes out there and hurts Dresky early or expends a lot of energy, he's going to slow down. He does every single fight. But the thing is, and why I'm not interested in Dresky, is because I think even if he slows down, Span is better. It is true. Jewish better saying he beat the GOAT, Walter. Yeah, he did beat Walter Walker, which begs the question, just how good is Lucas Dresky? I'm kidding. But that's the thing. It's like, I think Span could slow down in this fight and still, gassed out, maybe just land a bit better shots or land a timely takedown or two and and win a decision here. I have no interest in the fight. I think if we get like a plus 500 or a plus 600 GTD, maybe I'll poke it. Because I do think once Dresky clears, Span's early minutes, like the fight should kind of go into like neutral. And these guys should be able to just maybe make it all the way. But yeah, not a great fight for a pay-per-view. Moving on, we have an interesting one here. Jimmy Crute taking on Marcin Prochnow. Current price minus 285 on Crute. Comeback on Prochnow plus 245. I think Crute should be fine here. I mean, I can see the angle for Prochnow just via defending takedowns and out voluming Crute. Like, he is a better striker. He's a bit cleaner. But I think the difference in horsepower between the two is large. Like, Crute actually has a decent amount of power. And while he's not super durable, he's not facing a ton of power coming back on him from Prochnow. So I think he should be able to exchange a hit with him with impunity. And I also think Prochnow's defense early in his career was a bit overrated in terms of defensive wrestling. I think now, for a while he was carrying like an 80% takedown defense, just defending takedowns from like Felipe Lynch and a couple other guys. But he's been getting taken down much more frequently. And like, dude, Crute got Menefield down a bunch of times. I think he should get takedowns here if he wants them. Jewish better saying Crute by Kimura. I could see that. I'm inclined, Tim saying Crute sub minus 4,000. I'm inclined to think that as well. I mean, not minus 4,000, but I do think Crute should get takedowns pretty often if he wants them, and he should be able to submit him if he does get him down. Maybe it won't happen early, but I do think as Prochnow starts to slow down, and he does tend to gas very, very badly, it should get easier and easier for Crute. Glenbot saying Crute round 3 by cardio. I don't think Crute's got great cardio, but it's certainly better than Prochnow's, and that might just be enough. Yeah, I could see the justification for Prochnow outpointing him. Maybe he gets up a few times and Crute gets too tired. But I think Crute's just got massive physical advantages here, both in terms of power. He's more durable. He's a much better grappler. He's a much better wrestler. He should win this fight just fine. But again, it's like Jimmy Crute, you want to lay minus 285 on a punching bag like Crute? I'd say wait and see what the submission comes out at. If it's like plus 250 or higher, maybe you take a small poke at that. I think the under is a decent look. It's like minus 115 to the under 2.5 as we sit here right now, which is not the worst ever because, Crute's going to look to finish this fight wherever it is. He's got the power to put Prochnow out on the feet. He could probably get put out himself. And if he gets on top, he's got a great chance to finish. So maybe take a look at the under here. But I think Crute should handle business. Moving on, we got Adam Fugat taking on Islam Doutov. This is a funny fight. Doutov currently minus 560. The comeback on Fugat plus 410. Islam Doutov is an absolute wild man. Dude just comes out every fight, pressures hard, throws absolute haymakers in combination until he puts his opponents out. That's basically how he fights. Either knocks them out or he snatches a guillotine if they try to shoot on him. He hasn't been extended very much in his career. I believe he's only cleared the first round 1 or 2 times. The few times I have seen him extended, his gas doesn't look great to me. I feel like pretty, not certain, but a high degree of confidence that Doutov, the pace cannot sustain the pace he fights at. And it's very likely the first time he doesn't kill his opponent in the UFC to slow down badly and likely get finished. And like Adam Fugat on paper, he's a decent candidate to do that, right? Like he's kind of a dog. He's a tough fighter, decent boxer, decent kicker, decent wrestler. He's got a lot of experience. It's the kind of guy you might look to fade a guy like Doutov with. The problem for me is just Fugat's old, first of all. He's 36 years old. I just don't think he's got the durability for this kind of fight. Like, I'm not particularly high on Doutov, but he does throw hard and he does have very, very fast hands while he's fresh. And so I feel like he's going to get off on Fugat here fairly easily, especially early in this fight. And Fugat's chin is really not good. So I feel like he's going to hurt Fugat far more often than not and likely finish him a lot more often than not in the first round of this fight. I will say, I think if Fugat can somehow survive 7 minutes here, he has a lot of scope to take over this fight. So it could be a fight where you look for Fugat live. But like I wanted to get there on a Fugat play, but I look at it and man, like the guy just does not deal well when he's fighting with power. He tends to like, I don't want to say cower. That's not exactly right, but he seemed to get deterred off the first time he got hurt against Mallet. Same thing seemed to happen against Quinlan. Like first time he had a hard shot, he just got deterred. And you really need a guy with Doutov who's going to try to push him, try to mix the grappling in, try to fight back in the clinch. I'm interested in Fugat if he gets through the early part of this fight, but you know, the Doutov fade is going to come and it's going to come very quickly. But I do think, you know, if you can't take his shots, he's going to get you out of there. And I'm inclined to think Fugat can't. But yeah, I mean, if he does, you know, look to bet him live after the first round. Tim said chances of Islam grappling. I think that would be remarkably terrible idea if he tried to grapple, because Fugat's a pretty good grappler. I don't think he'll just out grapple Fugat. And if any, I actually think Fugat can out grapple him potentially. But if he does try to grapple, it's probably killing a lot of his finishing equity here, because like Islam's kind of a go 100% from the opening bell. And so I don't know that he knows how to fight any other way than that. And so if he comes out and just decides he's going to wrestle Fugat, I feel like he's going to crush a bunch of his early equity, which I think is going to be his equity in most of his fights. So I don't really think he's gonna, but maybe. I mean, it's worth keeping an eye out for. Moving on, we got Atiba Goautier. He is making his second fight in the UFC, coming off knocking out Jose Medina in the first round. He's taking on Robert Valentin, who is trying to avoid a pink slip here. Valentin 0-2 after losing to Ryan Loder and then losing a split decision to Torres Finney, where Torres Finney landed 2 significant strikes over 15 minutes. Current price here, Goautier minus 550. The comeback on Valentin plus 400. I'll be honest, I like Goautier as a fighter simply because he's an insane athlete for the division. Very fast, hits very, very hard, you know, seems to have pretty strong hips. But having said that, I do think Goautier is still very, very raw as a fighter. You know, his defense doesn't seem great. I don't think his striking is particularly refined. I don't think his grappling is good at all, really. So, like, I do think he's kind of getting a bit too much going on, Dogfather. I do think he's kind of getting a bit too much credit or a bit too much market respect at this point in his career. You know, you look at a guy like Robert Valentin. He was a favorite against Ryan Loder, who's a really good wrestler in his first fight in the UFC. Loder kind of dumpstered him there. Although he did take his back early in that fight, and then he was, you know, plus 220 against Torres Finney. Again, pretty good wrestler in his second fight, and he got wrestled in that fight. I don't think... Everybody loving the house. I don't think Goautier is much of a threat here for in terms of the grappling for Valentin. I actually think if Goautier decided to go to the grappling, he'd probably get out grappled. Like, Valentin's not a great grappler, pretty easy to wrestle and hold down, but he does have kind of tricky jiu-jitsu. I wouldn't even call it good, but it's very opportunistic. And if you're not ready for what's coming at you, you can get caught in it. And on the feet, like, yeah, I think Goautier is better just because he's faster and he hits a lot harder and he's probably more durable. But, like, Valentin's a dangerous fighter, man. Like, he's got power himself. I think there's some scope for Valentin getting on top of Goautier here. And I'm not sure how that'll work out for him. You know, I'd expect Atiba to be making improvements, big improvements every fight at only 23 years old. But getting a grappler like Valentin on top of him, I could see him making some mistakes and getting submitted. So I don't know. I haven't decided if I'll take a poke at it or not yet, but plus 400 feels a bit wide. Like, you're getting a guy in Valentin who got a lot more market respect against two guys in Finney and Loder whose skill sets were much more tailored to be punishing Valentin's weaknesses than Goautier is. Like, Goautier, I mean, 6hound saying Goautier being priced like a future champ is a bit absurd. I mean, I don't disagree. The thing is, I do think he's got, like, the athleticism and horsepower that could be on the table if he, like, improves his game enough. But it's not there yet, you know, and he is getting priced. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, the market respect he's getting off of beating Jose Medina just seems kind of crazy to me. And Valentin, on the other hand, went from fighting, you know, being respected a lot against two pretty seasoned grapplers to now getting no respect against a guy who's a very green striker. So I do lean the Valentin side here. I won't be shocked if he gets nuked, but I think he could knock Atiba out, and I think he could potentially submit him. So he's got some scope to win this fight for sure. Moving on, we got Francisco Prado taking on Nikolai Veritanikov. I have 2 units on Veritanikov plus 122. Current price, Prado is minus 150. The comeback on Veritanikov plus 130. I mean, candidly, I'm not like super high on Veritanikov or anything like that, but I am super low on Francisco Prado. I bet Matthews against him in his last fight. I even bet Otman Zaitar against him. I just don't think Prado, I bet Zel Huber against him. I just don't think Prado's got a lot of skills for this level. You know, Prado, his whole game, the best part of his game are his calf kicks, and he does throw them really hard, and they are very, very damaging. But everything else he does, he just comes out with 100% power, bombing big overhands that are very, very, very easy to see for any kind of a disciplined striker. He uses so much energy, he's usually gassed by the middle of round 2 every fight. He's got no defense. He sets nothing up. I don't think his grappling is strong at all. And he's also fighting at welterweight, which makes literally no sense. Like, the guy fought regionally at lightweight. He fought in his debut and in his second fight at lightweight. He's only 5'9". He's only got 69 inches of reach. And for a guy who is bad at setting up his strikes to begin with, now he's fighting in a weight class where everybody he fights is going to be taller with a reach advantage. It's just going to make it easier to kind of avoid him. And on the other side, you have Veritanikov, and like, Veritanikov's pretty mid. You know, he's a Muay Thai guy, you know, decent kicks, you know, decent straight shots, pretty bad defensive wrestling. He's an okay offensive wrestler, but he's a lot more tested than Prado is against high-level competition. You know, he fought Michael Morales on the Contender Series and actually gave him a reasonably competitive fight on Contender Series. And then he fought 2 fights ago. He fought Danny Barlow. And I think Barlow was pretty clearly overrated coming into the UFC, but he's a decent striker. Like, Danny Barlow, he's long, he's fast, he's got very good boxing. Like, he dumpster a guy like Prado with ease, I think. And Veritanikov basically matched him on volume and took him to a split decision. And like, those 2 performances to me, just in and of itself from a macro level, say enough to me that he should be a favorite in this fight. Then you couple in the fact that he's like 4 inches taller. He's got 5 inches of reach on him. He's the harder hitter. He's the much, much more refined striker. And to me, I think that's even the bigger thing is like I mentioned, Prado doesn't set anything up. It's a lot of lunging overhands, like from the parking lot. I don't think Veritanikov is going to have a ton of problems, like seeing what's coming at him. And I think it's the rare fight where Veritanikov actually has a grappling advantage here. Like, I actually think Veritanikov could land a couple takedowns in this fight and potentially do some work on top. So yeah, I mean, I think Veritanikov should be favored. He's just a more refined striker. He's bigger. He hits harder. He's got better cardio. You know, he's fought competitively with much better fighters than Prado has fought competitively with. Yeah, I don't really understand him being an underdog. I don't understand why Prado keeps getting all this market respect. You know, Zel Huber was only minus 240 against him. Matthews was only minus 190 against him. And now he's a favorite here. I'm just, maybe I'm missing something with him. But like, the guy has had 4 fights in the UFC. Jamie Malarkey easily outclassed him. Malarkey's no longer in the UFC. He beat Otman Zaitar, who, after Justin Tafa, might be the worst to ever do it. He got dumpstered by Zel Huber. He got beaten up pretty bad by Jake Matthews. And now, once again, I guess he's taking a step down. Maybe they think that this is a good spot for him, but I still think it's a pretty friendly landing spot for Veritanikov off getting kind of mauled by Austin Vanderford. So yeah, I like the Veritanikov side here. Moving on, we got Marvin Vtori taking on Brendan Allen. This is my biggest play on the card thus far. Probably will be in general. Went pretty heavy on the Marvin Vtori side. I think I have like 4 units at an average of like plus 210. He's plus 180 right now. Allen's minus 210. I still think the price is pretty good on Vtori. I honestly capped him a favorite here. I guess, you know, I know Marvin Vtori looked really bad in his last fight against Roman Dolidze, and I bet him in that fight, and it obviously didn't feel good for him to, you know, get out volume by Roman Dolidze, obviously. But I taped this fight, and I just feel like, you know, look, Dolidze's power was obviously affecting Vtori a lot, and once he started checking his leg kicks, it seemed like Vtori seemed kind of out of ideas in that fight. But Vtori at his core is a pretty good boxer, you know. He's got pretty good head strike defense historically. You know, he's got a decent counter left hand. He gets in and out all right. And he's taking on Allen. Now, Allen hits hard, I think. He's got decent power. But Allen's very, very sloppy. You know, he throws a lot of big power shots, a lot of nice body kicks. But he has no management of distance at all. And he's very, very easy to hit when he's in the pocket. So, like, on the feet, I think it's going to be close on the feet because Allen is, he just throws with a lot more intent than Vtori does. He's going to be easier to hit, and Vtori should, Vittori's should be able to dodge punches better and land a little easier. But I do think some of Allen's power shots should be offsetting, the work that Vtori is going to do on the feet. And then in the grappling, it's interesting because I don't expect Vtori to initiate the grappling at all in this fight. I'd expect if anybody does, it's going to be Allen. But I actually think Vtori can out-grapple Allen here, which might be an unpopular opinion. But I know he kind of looked bad on bottom against Jared Cannonier. But if you go back and watch that fight, he didn't look bad until he got hurt bad. And then the whole fight just kind of snowballed on him. And he just seemed kind of half-wit the rest of the way after the end of round 2. But if you go back further than that, he fought Jack Hermanson in a 5-round main event, and Jack tried to grapple him, and he badly out-grappled Jack in that fight. And Jack's a pretty good grappler. And if you go back even further than that to Vittori's, I think it was his second or third fight in the UFC, he fought Antonio Carlos Jr., and that was ACJ on all the meds at his absolute peak. And that was a really close fight. They grappled for most of the fight. ACJ never really got close to taking his back, with a body triangle. He actually won a round grappling with Antonio Carlos Jr. Got the top position, held him down, didn't get swept. And I watched that. I'm that was a much greener version of Vtori than he is today. If he was competitively grappling with ACJ, the worst case scenario here is that if Allen initiates the grappling, maybe he gets a couple takedowns, but it's probably competitive. He's probably not going to hold Vtori down. And the best case scenario is that Vtori can get the top position. And you saw last fight, as Allen started to get tired against Imavov, he just kind of accepted being on bottom, and you see something like that happen. So I kind of think the grappling's a wash. I kind of think the striking is somewhat close to a wash. And then you look at intangibles, Vittori's the more durable fighter by a fair amount. I think that's pretty obvious. And I also think he's got the better cardio by a fair amount. If they just strike, Allen's cardio should be fine. But when Allen has tried to push grappling, his cardio tends to flag pretty bad down the stretch of fights. And then it's who have they beaten? Brendan Allen's run it's been a nice little run here, but he hasn't really had any huge wins of confidence, of consequence. It's he beat Chris Curtis by split decision. And if Curtis doesn't suffer a non-contact injury, he probably wins that decision. Beat Paul Craig, beat Bruno Silva after Bruno Silva hurt him first. Lost the first round to Andre Muniz and then choked him out when he gassed out down the stretch. Beat Krzysztof Jotko, not in the UFC anymore. Jacob Malkoun, who he arguably lost to. Sam Alvey, who's washed. It's he's got some nice wins, but it's nothing crazy. Whereas Marvin Vettori he's been fighting the top of the division. I know he's stumbled on some rough times here, but the Leeds is a pretty solid fighter, and he's very good hardware. Jared Cannonier, there's no shame in losing to him. He outstruck Paulo Costa and Jack Hermanson over 25 minutes each. Yeah, he lost to Robert Whittaker. Who cares? And even taking it a step further from a market perspective, this fight was actually booked when Allen fought Chris Curtis last year. Marvin Vettori was minus 150 when this fight was booked before he pulled out. Now he turned around, he loses a clear decision to the Leeds, but it was relatively competitive. And Allen loses to Imavov, and Allen is minus 200. To me, it doesn't make much sense. I think it's going to be a very close fight, but I have Vettori at plus 100 to minus 125 is where I think the line should be. And given what the line is now, that's enough for me to kind of send it for a big play here. Chucky Betsing, any thoughts on Buchecha and Boudet? Not yet, really. Josh better saying who won their first fight is the real question. I think from anybody that doesn't know, they got into a fight at an event. But yeah, I really like the spot for Vtori here, at least versus the line. I wouldn't be shocked if Allen wins, obviously, but I do think the line is clearly very, very wide. Moving on, we have Vinicius Lockdog Olivivera taking on Kyler Phillips. Absolute banger to close out the prelims. Kind of crazy that Vtori and Allen and Olivivera Phillips are the last two fights on the prelims, especially given a couple of the fights that we have on the main card here. Really interesting fight here, in my opinion. Olivivera minus 161. The comeback on Phillips is plus 141 at the moment. Obviously, Olivivera 3-0 in the UFC. Had a come-from-behind win against Bernardo Sopaj. Beat Ricky Simone, and then he out-toughed Saeed Nurmagomedov in his last fight in, I believe it was Abu Dhabi, to get a unanimous decision there. And now he's fighting Kyler Phillips, who is coming off of probably a career worst performance against Rob Font. I believe Phillips went off minus 500, minus 600 in that fight. Took Font down early, controlled him for most of the first round, and then when he got up, look, we've always known Kyler Phillips has not great cardio, but when he got up, he just seemed to have nothing left. There wasn't even much of a pace, nothing. He was just done. and Font just put it on him for the last 10 minutes of that fight. Was a really surprising outcome to me because, like, I know Phillips is bad cardio, but we've seen him fight, late into fights before. And to me, the big question of this entire fight really comes down to how you think the market is pricing Phillips' cardio, the cardio dynamic here. Is it appropriately pricing it? Because skill for skill, I think Phillips is much better. Lockdog obviously is a dangerous fighter, and he's very, very aggressive, comes forward, throws big shots, always looking to hunt for the knockout and whatnot. But he is very, very hittable, and his shots are very, very wide. And he's taken on a guy like Phillips who has much better footwork, is much quicker with his hands, and tends to throw straight to the target. And unlike some of the guys he's fought recently, Phillips actually packs like real power in his hands. And unlike Saeed, I mean, Phillips will throw more than his fair share of spinning kicks, but if he pressures him heavy, he's not going to throw a spinning kick from 2 feet away. He'll just sit down on shots in the pocket with him. I think Phillips is the better boxer, and I think he's the much better striker in general. And in the grappling, I kind of feel similarly. Olivivera did okay grappling with Saeed last fight, but I really can't get over how bad he looked when he got put on bottom by Bernardo Sopa in his debut. Granted, again, it was his debut, so you don't want to put too much into it, but it looked awful to me personally. And he's taken on Kyler Phillips, who is a really good wrestler and who also has a black belt in jiu-jitsu and is really, really strong on top. I think Phillips is clearly the better grappler in this fight. I think he's clearly the better striker. And between the two, he's fought like the higher level of competition too. The question is just going to be, 7-8 minutes into this fight, Lockdog's still going to be there coming for him if he doesn't get finished. And the question is, will Phillips have the cardio to kind of match the pace that Lockdog's going to try to set? I will say, I do think Lockdog's cardio is getting a bit overblown. Like, the guy does a very good job of fighting through fatigue, but we've seen him fatigued a bunch of times deep into fights in his career. So even though I think he's more reliable to like enforce a pace down the stretch, I'm not sure it's a situation where Phillips can't land his own offense while he's tired, given that Lockdog gets tired himself. Brava saying it feels like a buy low spot on Kyler after the big letdown. I kind of think so too. I haven't decided if I'll definitely bet it or not yet, but it does feel that way to me because it's like Kyler Phillips was getting like super juice prices against Leone Barcelos, against Pedro Munoz, against Rob Font. And then the Font fight happens and he just completely cardio dumps out of nowhere. And now he's an underdog to a guy who was just plus 200 against Saeed Nurmagomedov. Like, I'd argue Phillips is a much better version of Saeed Nurmagomedov. So, yeah, I do think you have to give a lot of credence to the fact that Phillips' cardio has just been very inconsistent throughout his career, and he could melt here. But I think it's kind of close to a pick'em fight, honestly, just because I do feel like you have to give Phillips probably like 20% finishing upside at least. Like, he's a very dangerous submission grappler. He's got nasty kicks, and he's got pretty good hands on the feet. And we've seen Lockdog like finish 3 times in his career. So, like, him knocking out Lockdog wouldn't be all that surprising. And if you get the 20% and the finishing equity, it's like, is Lockdog really like 75% if this goes the distance? Because I think most people would reasonably favor Phillips in round 1. And then at that point, it's like, I feel like surely he's like 40% to win at least one of the last 2 rounds, So, yeah, I mean, I lean the Phillips side. I might get to a bet there. This does feel like an overreaction versus where Kyler's been lined recently. And obviously there's a ton of hype around Olivivera after, that really nasty KO in his debut and then winning a fight in Abu Dhabi against Saeed. Yeah, I'm leaning towards the Phillips side. I think he's got the better skill set here. It's really just going to be a question of how his gas tank holds up. Moving on, we have a fight that I wish was not made. We have Daniel Zel Huber taking on Michael Johnson. Current price on Zel Huber is minus 500. The comeback on Johnson plus 375. It's kind of a bummer because I've been really enjoying this like Michael Johnson late career run where like he keeps being fed bombs by the UFC and the market keeps making him playable prices, acting as if, these guys are at the class of the guys who have beaten him in the past. Like, I think I had him at minus 170 against Izaitar, minus 130 against Darius Flowers. And now they're sending his old ass to fight young killer like Daniel Zel Huber. And I don't love it because we all know what the game plan is here for the UFC, and it's for Zel Huber to open up the prelims with a spectacular finish. Having said that, I mean, I'm not going to bet Michael Johnson. Don't get me wrong. I do think he's pretty clearly at the end of his run. I think his durability has been declining for quite some time. But it wouldn't surprise me if he gave a competitive scrap here. He is the better boxer of the two. He's got much faster hands. He manages range a lot better than Zel Huber. Does a really good job of getting in and out. Picks his shots, really well. Yeah, 6-hound saying is Zel Huber ever won round one. It's a good point. I wouldn't be shocked if Johnson won the first round of this fight. I do think Johnson, for as long as he's conscious in front of Zel Huber, can have or at least early in the fight, moments of success. The problem is just Zel Huber seems to be unhumanly durable. Like the guy can just take shots and just keep coming. He throws volume himself. He's obviously gigantic. I think he's got a lot of height and reach on Johnson here. He hits harder. He's got much better cardio than Johnson has in his career, and he's a much better kicker than Johnson is. So I think it's going to the kicking game of Zel Huber, I think, is going to force Johnson to have to fight in close a lot more often than he might want to here. And then you look at the age difference. Johnson's almost 40. Zel Huber's 26. The durability difference. Johnson's shin's clearly going. Zel Huber is super durable. The power difference. Zel Huber's got way more power than Johnson has. The cardio difference. Johnson's cardio hasn't looked good in years, and Zel Huber's looks really good. All the macro is just against Johnson here. I'd love to see him pull off the upset. I just don't really see it. Again, I think he could do it because he is the better boxer here, but it would have to be on really, really thin margins. And so, I feel like Zel Huber on youth, physicality, just danger, pure danger that he brings to the table, being a large favorite makes a lot of sense. I hate that they're doing this to Michael Johnson, but if they gave him his couple bonuses against the Zaitar and Flowers, and they're happy to move on from him now. Moving on, we got Dan Ige taking on Patricio Pitbull. Ige minus 205, Pitbull plus 175. Pitbull obviously coming into this fight off what a lot of people viewed as a very, very disappointing debut performance against Yair Rodriguez. I'll be honest, I was kind of pissed at myself after that fight that I didn't bet Rodriguez, and I had Pepe on for that card, and him and I were talking about how we felt there was a decent chance that Rodriguez was just going to beat his ass. And I felt that way because Rodriguez is a lot taller, a lot longer, a lot younger, a lot faster, and had a really diverse arsenal. He could attack Pitbull from places that Pitbull just really couldn't counter or match it from. And that's more or less what happened. The only really shocking thing from that fight to me was that Yair just kind of flat out grappled Pitbull too, which I really did not see coming in that fight. But I did feel on paper, it was not a great fight for Pitbull, especially older in his, so far along he is in his career, 36 years old. And now, because of that fight, he's a pretty big underdog to Dan Ige. And I actually think this is a much friendlier fight for him in a lot of respects. As I mentioned, Yair was a lot more diverse than Pitbull was. And the kicking game of Yair gave him a ton of issues. And Ige's just not going to bring that to the table. I mean, Ige's really I don't want to call him a brawler. That's kind of disrespectful. But he's a power boxer at this point in his career. That's what he is. And I feel that kind of game offers Pitbull a lot more opportunities to kind of get his counter game working, pick his shots, counter Ige, and land big shots. So I do think this is a much friendlier matchup for him than the Yair Rodriguez fight was. Having said that, I still don't really love it for him. Pitbull's durability seemed to be going when he was still in Bellator. He got hurt by Sergio Pettis. Obviously got finished by AJ McKee. Obviously, Yair did a number on him. And now he's fighting a guy in Ige who's been fighting the best guys in the UFC for a minute now, who is known for being cast iron when it comes to durability and also having very, very big power. And I think that alone is probably enough here, because I do think Pitbull will land some shots here and will have more offensive success than he had against Yair. But I don't think he's going to have an easy time deterring Ige's offense. And given that I think Ige is faster, he's also the bigger hitter and way more durable than Pitbull is at this point in his career. I just feel minus 200 is probably fine. He's the much more likely guy to finish the fight, in my opinion. I trust his work rate more than Pitbull's, and I trust that he's not as close to the end as Pitbull is. I wouldn't be shocked if Pitbull makes this a really competitive scrap and edges a close decision at a 6-ounce point. Ige does have a history of dropping close decisions, but I think Pitbull is pretty close to the end of the road, and I think he's going to be running on thin margins to win this fight. So, yeah, line seems fine to me. Moving on, we got Kevin Holland and Daniel Rodriguez. Current price, Holland's minus 425. The comeback on Rodriguez plus 325. I think Holland should run him over. I don't, again, this is another one where it's I love the matchmaking for Holland in his last fight, taking on Vicente Luque. And I guess they're trying to do something similar here because Rodriguez will get into bangers. But yeah, like Tim said, Holland anyway wants. The issue is Holland's way taller. He's way longer. And the biggest thing is the speed. Is just like the speed difference is just insane between the two of them. Holland's going to have no problem finding Rodriguez whenever he wants here. On top of that, he's just a much harder hitter. He's the better grappler if it goes to the ground. He's the way more durable fighter. He's way younger. Holland has basically every advantage in this fight, in my opinion. Like, yeah, maybe he could do a Kevin Holland and let, Rodriguez kind of get in tight and not move around and get into a brawl. But even in a brawl, I favor Holland like pretty big here. So, yeah, I mean, look, Rodriguez is a fun fighter, volume boxer, kind of guy that's fun to bet on. But I just think he's giving away so many advantages in terms of like physical attributes here. And then also even from the technical side, Holland's just way better technically at this point in their careers. I think Holland ITD is going to be, it's probably not going to be a great price. I guess it's minus money given where the money line is. So hard to want to do too much business with that. But I do think this should be Holland like very, very easy. I just don't see a lot of scope for if I know it's always easy to say Kevin Holland can like drop any ball or whatever, but it's not like Rodriguez is going to mix in grappling here. And even if Rodriguez tries to mix in grappling, he's probably going to get submitted or just won't get him down. So yeah, I don't really see much of a path for Rodriguez short of like an insanely tight decision where Holland fights like a complete moron. But I think this should be Holland fairly easily. Moving on, we got Paulo Costa taking on Roman Copalov in the co-main event. Current price, Copalov minus 255. The comeback on Paulo Costa plus 215. I am kind of tempted on the Costa side. I haven't decided if I'll play it or not, but I do think Costa, if he shows up with his A game, brings a lot of things to the table that could trouble Copalov. Like Copalov's surely the better technical striker. He measures distance a bit well, nasty kicker, and that rear body kick should be open all day for him. He's probably got a speed advantage too. But, as we all know, Roman Copalov, first of all, if you get inside on him, he's there to be cracked. Second of all, the guy's got bad cardio. I know he finished Chris Curtis in the third round of his last fight, but I honestly think the biggest variable or factor in that fight playing out the way it did was the fact that Copalov chewed Curtis's leg off in the southpaw. Like Curtis was on one leg by the third round. And at that point, it was kind of just a shooting gallery for him. I don't think he'll have that same option here. He doesn't throw a ton of inside calf kicks. And like Costa's really, really tough. I'd be surprised if he was able to just cripple him with calf kicks. Only guy to really do that to him is Izzy. And, again, those were all outside low kicks. And even though I favor Copalov in the early part of this fight, Costa, when he's checked in, does tend to go forward. He goes forward. He throws a lot of body kicks himself. He tends to rip the body himself a lot in the boxing. As we know, Copalov's cardio to begin with isn't that great, and Costa's is pretty good. I think Costa is the much more durable of the two fighters. While I don't expect him to go to the grappling, he never really does. I do think if one of them was to have big grappling success, though, like if Roman tried to bail himself off pressure by shooting on Costa, I think Costa would out-grapple him pretty badly. I actually think Costa's a pretty good grappler. So yeah, Tim saying Roman's finishes in the UFC are all in 2 and 3. I know, which is pretty crazy. I don't know. It's interesting. The biggest caution for me with Costa here is it's been a while since he really looked like fully plugged in. You go back and watch, the Strickland fight. I know it was a split. It shouldn't have been. He seemed pretty detached for much of that fight. Obviously he had a couple moments here and there, had some moments with the calf kicks, but he never really tried to change things up or pressure Strickland and let his hands go. And that's kind of what he has to do here to win this fight. Similar thing with the Whitaker fight. He obviously landed the head kick that hurt Whitaker in round 1. And to be fair, Whitaker's a really tough guy to track. So I'm not going to give him too much shit for that. But even the Vtori fight, you go back to that. It was a 5-round fight. He fought pretty well, but he literally, his offense just came in spurts. And that's what tends to happen with him. And I think here he needs to be, I shouldn't say from minute 1, but he needs to mostly be on the gas and forcing Copalov back. If he gives Copalov a pretty fight, he's probably going to get outstruck and lose. If he forces exchanges, though, I think Roman's going to gas and probably melt on the back end of this fight. Just because, Costa gets tired, but he fights through it really well. Roman, we've seen him completely collapse when he's tired before. But all of that being said, Roman's over 70% implied at this point, which is basically saying he wins 7 out of 10 against a more durable fighter with much better gas tank, who's also the better grappler and also goes to the body a lot. And to me, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Costa's, I don't know how checked in Costa is anymore, but I do think Costa has all the tools he needs here to win this fight. And so will he implement them? We'll see. But I'm pretty tempted by it because, look, Costa's had competitive fights with much better fighters than Copalov in like recent years. So yeah, I also think underrated. Juice Better saying Costa's funny as fuck, which actually brought this into my mind. I think it's underrated how tough Costa is. I think because he's such a funny MMA Twitter personality, like people treat him as unserious. But like the dude has, other than the Izzy fight where he got finished, the dude does not like quit when he's in there. You know, he keeps coming. He'll get tired and just keep coming at you. Could have easily asked out at the end of the Romero fight. Didn't. Came out there hard in round 3, even though he was tired. Same thing with the Vtori fight. He was like, they had to change the weight by 10 pounds to accommodate him. He was clearly not in the best shape, and he kept coming late in that fight. Same thing in the Strickland fight. Like, Costa is not going to go away. Like, I actually trust him to, like, dig deep if he has to. So, yeah, I lean the Costa side. Might get to a bet there. We'll see. And that brings us to the main event. Another BMF title fight. Third fight of this trilogy that Dustin Poirier is 2-0 in, and is also Dustin Poirier's retirement fight. Current price, Max Holloway minus 135. The comeback on the diamond plus 115. I have mixed feelings. On the one hand, I feel as if Poirier, like, not that much has changed since the last time they fought in terms of, like, yeah, their ages have changed, but the dynamic of the fight being that, like, Holloway is a volume boxer, and that's really how he wins fight, is on the back of volume. And he's fighting a guy who also has really good cardio, who can match the volume, at least to a degree, and a guy who's just got much, much more power in his hands and is much more likely to land big shots and have big moments. A couple things have obviously changed. Like, Poirier is 36 years old, and prior to the Islam fight, where I actually thought he looked great, but like prior to that fight, Poirier looked like he'd been declining for some time, in my opinion. And it does kind of, it doesn't completely remind me of the Cater fight last night, but, you know, when you get up to like 36, 37, you know, at heavyweight, middleweight, even to a degree, light heavyweight, it doesn't matter quite as much just because the athleticism stick is like a lot lower. But in the lower weight classes, man, when you start to slip, you tend to slip hard. And like, that's a pretty big concern for me, is that we know it's his retirement fight and he's 36 years old. Prior to the Islam fight, which, I mean, who knows what he was doing for that fight, but like prior to the Islam fight, he looked like he was starting to, you know, get old. Holloway, obviously only 33. So that is a pretty big macro concern for me. Conversely, on the other side, I would argue Max Holloway has also looked, you know, regressed in recent years. You know, I don't punish him too much for losing Alexander Volkanovski. Volk, obviously one of the best ever. But yeah, Tim just said it. How's Max's chin? I mean, Max is a guy for much of his career, you know, he's relied on offense. You know, he's always been a guy, not that he's had bad defense, but he's always been a guy that got cracked on the chin a few times a fight. And, you know, he used to walk through those shots. You know, now, you know, we just saw Poirier put him down pretty violently. Obviously, the last time he fought Poirier, he got hurt a bunch. I know everybody thinks he looked amazing against Justin Gaethje, but honestly, sorry, rewatching that fight, I kind of had a bit of a different takeaway. You know, the first 2 rounds of that fight, Gaethje was totally disengaged and like just trying to fight him on the outside and point fight him. And like Gaethje is just not enough of a technician to win that fight. But from like round 3 on, Gaethje actually started stepping on it and like pressing forward, and he had a lot more success there. And I am pretty confident that Gaethje, or that Poirier is not going to accept just sitting on the back foot and letting Max outpoint him. He's probably going to go forward. He's probably going to throw a lot of power shots at Max. And I'm not confident that Max is anywhere near the guy he was when they first fought, or the last time they fought, which was what, 5-6 years ago now. I'm not confident that Max's chin is where it was. So I don't know. It's a weird fight because, like, obviously Poirier is the more natural lightweight. Max is coming back up to lightweight again. Poirier, I think, likely has more moment upside. Probably has more finishing upside in all likelihood. So, and can probably match the output of Max to a degree. So it's like you would think it should favor him. But at the same time, you know, we know, I shouldn't even say Poirier's close to the end in the beginning. This is his last fight. This is the end. We're at the end of Dustin Poirier at 36 years old. Max Holloway probably got a bunch of fights left. He's 33. And like, there is enough macro tail risk on the Poirier side that if this is the time when he goes over the edge and Max just volumes him up, will anybody be shocked? Like, not really. So I don't know. I lean Poirier at the number, but I don't think I'm passionate enough. I think there's a lot of variance in this fight. I think there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of Max's chin, his form, and then obviously in terms of like Dustin's form. Are we going to get what we saw before the Islam fight? Are we going to get the guy from the Islam fight? Is he regressed even further? He probably is at 36 and another year off. I feel like the uncertainty is like very, very, very high in this fight. And given that, it should be a closely line fight. I lean Poirier, but I probably won't get to a bet on it. Yeah, I mean, that's it for me. As of now, the bets I have Vtori, I have Veritanikov. I might bet Costa. I might bet Phillips. I got to look a bit closer at Valentin, but I'm thinking about a bet there too. Yeah, but that's going to do it, guys. Thanks for coming by. Appreciate you guys all stopping in during a solo show tonight. Drop a like, subscribe. I'd appreciate it. Lags will be back with me next Sunday, and we'll run through this again. And yeah, guys, good luck on your bets next weekend. Let's make some money. Peace.